Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking with Kathy Gladys Drake. Kathy is a student at Mount Royal University in Alberta, and because of some comments she made about the trans issue, she now has to check in and out with security as she comes and leaves the campus. So I just thought I'd have Kathy on to talk about what's going on and how this all happened. Thank you very much for coming on, Kathy. It's good talking to you.
Thanks, Obaid. Thanks for having me.
Because from my understanding, you made comments on social media, not even comments at the university itself, but then you were
One
still
was a
censured.
private conversation at the university as well.
Okay.
So in the pub, that was the first complaint against me. The first notice from Community Standards had two complaints, and now I've received a third one. So the first one, I was sitting in a pub with a professor, and another alumna or alumni. He's a man. Um, and we were sitting there having a discussion, and then a trans person who's a man who believes he's a woman sat down at the table and began to dominate the conversation and talk about himself. Sorry, my dog just came in. Talk about himself. And he began to say that he believed that he always felt like a woman. And I politely said that being a woman is not a feeling. He then proceeded to talk about how he can't find any partner in the gym who's a woman who wants to spar with him or practice martial arts or any of that sort of stuff. And I said, I'd be happy to be his gym partner if he can't find a woman. I can do that if he wants to. And then I told him that objectively, as a woman, I think that he would be considered a very attractive man, a very handsome man.
Mhm.
This was the linchpin for him. He stood up. He was very offended. He said, do you know how offensive that is to say? And I just kind of shrugged, like, you know, I'm a freedom of speech absolutist and I believe in saying what I believe is the truth. And so he then asked me, well, what if I said you looked like a man? And I just kind of shrugged. And he said, again, he reiterated how offensive that is. And I said, but it's true. I believe it's true. And then he started crying in a very theatrical way, almost as like a caricature of what he thinks a woman would behave like, very performative. And then he went to the other table, and the professor stood up and put his hand out and said, "You went too far." And I'm like, wow, I'm a woman being silenced by men. And then my friend I was sitting with finished his beer. It took about 20 minutes. We continued chatting. And then as we were leaving, my friend said, let's go over and say goodbye just in good faith to let him know that there's no hard feelings and that, you don't
Yeah.
hate him or anything like that. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I want to do that because, my legal mind was going that that's going to get turned around on me. And in the complaint, it did. It did get turned around on me as if I was some sort of deranged stalker that was following this man from table to table. But so my friend said, let's go over there and reassured me. He's like, come on, just do it. Let's go. So he walked over to the table and I kind of sheepishly followed behind him. Um, and they'll be able to see this in all the CTV footage or whatever if they want to look like I don't have any threatening body language or anything like that. And I go up to the table and the trans man said, he's a man biologically. He doesn't put out his hand. He doesn't say, get out of here, or like he doesn't put up any boundaries. He begins to engage with me again and he starts talking. I said to him, I said, look, I'm really sorry for hurting your feelings. But I want you to know that like I'm never going to lie to you. I'm always going to tell you what I believe is the truth. And I told him that I have other trans friends that know that I don't think that they're women and that I don't think that they look like women and that when that subject is breached, I tell the truth and then we move on and we live our lives and we just interact with each other as human beings. And then the trans man, he went into how he believed that he was protecting women in women's bathrooms and women's spaces by kicking out other trans men who he believed didn't perform as women as well. So he believed that he deserved access to the women's washrooms. He said, "Do you know how much money I've spent to look like this? I try really hard to be in women's washrooms, and there's other trans people that don't try very hard, so I kick them out of the women's washrooms, but I deserve access to the washrooms," is what he said. And I said, "I disagree." And just that's it. I disagreed, a very respectful tone. And then I left. I said goodbye. And then I took my leave. So that was a complaint against me, saying that I said harmful things, that I was threatening. They said I was threatening, all sorts of bizarre wording that was really condemning and not accurate. I was simply disagreeing with him. So that was the first complaint. The other two were posts that I posted. One was on a woman who had a booth where she was selling items that she had knitted or crocheted, and she was selling these items to raise money for a legal firm that is going to try and fight the Alberta government on their upcoming legislation to protect children, and to give parents parental rights. And I asked her, I said, so what are you raising money for? Because her sign said Trans Action Legal Fund. And she said, I'm raising money for an organization called Stepping Stones. So I went to their website later, and checked it out. And she said this Trans Action Fund, legal fund, will try and prevent parents from knowing that their children are transitioning at school. She thought it was very important that children be able to keep that secret from their parents, that if they want to change their name, wear different clothing, change their pronouns at school, that be kept secret from their parents. And that's when I made a post calling her a groomer. I don't think that groomers, in my mind, I don't think that they deserve respect anymore, the same way that I wouldn't treat like a Nazi in Nazi Germany with respect, right? I think that they're evil. So I used some very salty language. I called her fat and ugly. I said that she was mentally ill because she didn't know if she was a boy or a girl, because she goes by they, them pronouns. And I said she was unhealthy. And why is she, involving herself in legal action? Why does she feel entitled to other people's children? Um, and so anyone who thinks that parents should be kept in the dark and have secrets about their kids, that is a huge red flag. So that's why I use the word groomer and why I don't take that back at all. Um, and that's all within the law. It's all within freedom of speech. And then the other post, which I made after I received complaints from the university saying that I must check in with security 15 minutes before class, within 15 minutes after class, and that I cannot remain on the campus outside of those times. I made another post where I posted a video of a professor. And this video of a professor, she's sitting on the ground by her bed. She has a shaved head, and she looks kind of like buggy-eyed, and she looks mentally ill the way that she's conducting herself. And she's in this podcast. She's talking about things like she's justifying minors getting double mastectomies, comparing it to children getting breast implants or breast reductions with parental consent, which I would argue, that needs to be examined as well. But at least with those procedures, it's not a complete removal of the healthy organ, right? So I called her a groomer as well because she's advocating for this in a very sort of using very gentle language and kind of this guise of compassion. So I said groomer professor at Mount Royal University. I said the loonies are running the asylum. And I said that she implies that you don't care about trans people if you don't agree with her position. I care about trans people. I believe I posted as well. I posted the leaked WPATH files
Mhm.
below this post, um, because this is medical malpractice on par with the lobotomy. It's pseudoscience and it's experimentation, not just on minors, but on vulnerable adults. vulnerable adults who have other mental health issues. Um, and I don't think it's okay. And so I'm speaking out with what I believe in my conscience is the right thing to do. So the complaint against me then showed up again in my email for this post, and they said that I was being threatening. So they're using words where it seems like they might even want to apply a criminal charge against me. So this is getting they're heating things up a lot. The checking in and out with security seems to be some sort of humiliation ritual. It's treating me like I'm a criminal, psychological sort of warfare to wear me down. The process is the punishment in these institutions, whether it's you're at a job or in a school. These DEI sort of people, these HR people, they use the process as the punishment. So that's basically where I'm at now.
Few things on that. The first is okay, and this is something, like I've talked about before, but starting with, that first man who said, he's a woman, it's that performative aspect. We'd gotten to a point where it doesn't matter if a girl wants to play with trucks and a boy wants to play with dolls or whatever, right? Like it didn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Let them play, let the little kids play with whatever toys they want to play with. Now it's, well, if a girl plays with trucks, she must be a boy. If a boy wants long hair and plays with Barbies, must be a girl. And they're going back and they're using those stereotypes, 1950 stereotypes of what a woman does, what a man does, what a like what's a boy's toy, what's a girl's toy. Okay, and I'm not denying if you take little kids and you throw dolls and trucks and like all kinds of like different toys, girls will gravitate towards one type, boys will gravitate towards another, and there will be a very, very small crossover. And it's like I said, let kids play. But there's that aspect of it. The other one is you're being asked to check in and out with security because you made some comments, and it is like they're kind of calling you a threat. But what about all these people since October 7th of 2023 who are out there protesting for Hamas and you know calling for the death of Jews? Like I think University of Calgary had an encampment for a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. Um, are these people being asked to check in and out with security? It's just the whole
Well, and
hypocrisy of the thing.
I wouldn't want them to have to check in and out with security because I believe in free speech, whether I agree with someone or not. But I don't think that, I mean, but if they're calling, I've never heard them call for death of, I haven't been following it that closely. Um, I saw that the pro-Palestinian students had a booth in the courtyard, or sorry, the food court. And I went and talked to them and I said, "Hey, you have free speech. Here's some contacts for you if anyone tries to give you trouble about your free speech." And I told them I lean towards the Israel side, but I support your free speech. So like I wouldn't want to try and silence them, but yeah, calling for violence. I've never called for violence.
Mhm.
I've never said that anyone should threaten these people. I never in person when talking to these people said anything threatening. I never gave any threatening body language. I've never went to this professor's office and banged on her door and, tried to threaten her or anything like that. So I'm not a threatening person. So yeah, you're right. It does seem like there's a double standard. And with the double standard towards me, there was a professor who posted a picture of me on the internet. So I wore to class a shirt that said, "Where are the bodies?" in regards to the anomalies at the Kamloops residential school. And I wore it to a lecture where there was their tokenized chief of the school that they bring in a native elder. And I feel like it's exploitive. That I feel my heart goes out to him. He's a very kind man, I think. But anyway, so I wore this shirt saying, "Where are the bodies?" And I took a picture of it and made a post about that. And this professor who works there, um, Gabriel Lindstrom Weaselhead, I believe her name is, she made a post saying, calling me out for my race, saying I'm a white settler, colonialist, or something like that. And then saying I was full of hate, and all of these other things, racism, all of this stuff, and made a post about me. In the picture, she just very lightly blacked out a little bit of my eyes, but it's still very obvious that it's my
Mhm.
face. And, I'm wearing that shirt. And so professors are allowed to make posts like that where they criticize a student, but I'm not allowed to make posts.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like, I was talking about the double standard, but that is, I don't know how much of this stuff you've read or what you've gone into. So if you read the paper Repressive Tolerance by Marcuse, so there's two things. There's liberating tolerance and there's repressive tolerance. Repressive tolerance is to repress the voices of the conservatives or those who will harm the marginalized. That is tolerance because then you're tolerating the marginalized. And liberating tolerance is when you allow the marginalized to do that which you would censor someone else. So it's this idea that's like that's how they justify the double standard. It's like any cult. I mean, I've gotten past the point of like splitting hairs. Like this stuff is a cult, and it's
It is a cult, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and it's like any cult. You have to cut out anything else that might have dissent, and you have to allow your side to do things that you won't allow the other side to do. Like it's just like that. It's I don't want to digress too much, and just the free speech thing. I'm about as absolute as you can get. Those protesters, like the Hamas protesters, if they're walking down the street and they're saying, "Free Gaza," "Stop the oppression," "Stop the genocide," all that stuff, I don't care. But when they start saying things like Intifada revolution, there is only one solution.
Yeah, that seems like a call to genocide, a call to violence. That is not protected by free speech. That is not
Technically, it is. It's not a direct call to action, but
right.
that's where you're getting into a gray line. And I mean, you've had at some protests where they've said straight out, like, gas the Jews. So,
Wow.
and I mean, not every protest in Canada, not, but there's been a few instances of where that I've seen where people have said straight out, gas the Jews. So, yeah, okay, like that crosses the line. And so when you're calling, in my mind, okay, when you're calling for Intifada, Intifada is one thing. It was a violent revolution. You know, it was a pogrom against Jews. Because Israel was in Lebanon, and that's they want. So it's like that's what I was trying to point out. Like you didn't say anything threatening. Even saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Is what river and what sea are you talking about? Right? So it's a Jordan River, and it's you're going to the Jordan, and you're going all the way out to the sea, and you're going to the coast. So you're wiping out Israel. Like, but again, like just saying that is, that's protected under free speech, such as we have in Canada, because we don't really have free speech up here. But when you say it with a whole bunch of other things, that gets to the point where if you're not going to, if you're, they're making you go to security. These people who have been blocking students from going to certain places, who have been saying things that are just skirting the line, they should have to go through security as well. Because I mean, if you just look at the two, if I'm law enforcement or something, and I look at these two instances, I'm going to focus more on them because they are a more potential threat than you are, just based on what was said, right? Like that, and that's what like it's this mentality of we can let certain things go because it's the right political bent. I think it's from Dune, which is maybe a silly source, but it's like when I'm weak, I abide by your principles, and when I'm strong, like I force you to abide by mine. Like it's just like I'll accept your freedom, I'll use your religious freedom, I'll do all that when I'm weak, but when I have some strength, I'll cow you into submission with my values, and that's exactly what's going on here.
That is so interesting because, I've been talking with various free speech people and they talk about how it seems all sorts of free speech people seem to have double standards and they don't seem to be fully principled when it comes to something that upsets them. And even like there are people who are pro free speech, they claim, but they're very pro-Israel. And so they do want to shut down the speech of the Palestinian protesters or someone, let's say, like Norman Finkelstein. Or there's an example recently on X. There's a great account, Chanel.
Yeah,
Um,
I know Chanel.
yeah, do you know her at?
It's her name. I can't pronounce it. It's
Yeah,
like
it's like spelt like channel,
yeah,
but
yeah,
Chanel is how you.
but like her last name is like Pnaff or something like that. I can't pronounce it.
Right.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. So
Uh,
she's always pointing out all of the indoctrination in
uh,
schools. And she recently noticed that on X, the word cis is censored, right?
yeah.
And it's censored because it's considered a slur. And she's a freedom of speech absolutist. So she believes that you should be able to say words. And so I also agree that cis is a slur, but I don't think it should be censored. And when she posted this on her page recently on X, formerly Twitter, um, she had a whole bunch of people who said, no, it should be censored. It should be censored. So it's like, here we have the strength. It's on the people who use this word are not on our team.
Mm.
They're not part of our tribe, this tribalism. And so we're going to relish in censoring them using this word. That's not principled.
Oh
That's not
no.
principled at all. It's like we need to actually allow people who we disagree with freedom of speech for everyone.
I'd like to get back to the university thing, but but this is kind of they would be related. It's you've had a deterioration of free speech rights. You can see the popularity of it. And I mean, we can go back to the 80s and talk about like, the religious right and like the censorship back then, but I want to concentrate on the stuff starting from like the 90s. You've actually had an attack on civil rights because the whole critical race theory, all that stuff, intersectionality, they went and attacked the civil rights. I mean, Derek Bell's one of his seminal papers was all about Brown versus the Board of Education. And he was actually against Brown versus Board. I mean, one of the things he said kind of made sense. He said that, they should have desegregated education, not schools. Because if you desegregated education, then you made education equal across the board and you wouldn't have to bus kids back and forth, you know, like you have to bus them a couple hours in each direction type of thing to go to different schools. You could have kept them in their same schools, you just raise the standard of education. But again, like, so there is this stuff that's coming from the university side that's pushing this censorship because they want to do it.
Well, like you said, it's a cult. And so these cult leaders, I did take a couple very good courses in leadership theory with a fantastic instructor. He's not a professor, but he does have a master's degree. Wonderful instructor. And he taught in leadership theory from the textbook by Northhouse, Leadership Theory and Practice. It's a great textbook. And it talks about how true leadership does not involve coercive control. So these cult leaders, just like Jim Jones and that sort of thing, they are not true leaders. True leaders, you want to follow them out of your own volition. You're not doing it because you feel like you're going to be harmed in some way, whether, you're not going to be sanctioned. You're following them out of genuine motivations, internally motivated, not externally motivated by pressures of coercion. So these cult leaders are not using true leadership. They are anti-leaders, for lack of a better word.
I mean, stick with the gender ideology. Like, you don't talk to TERFs. We like the term itself is stupid. Don't talk to detransitioners. I mean, we've had MPs and MPPs talk about how detransitioners are a right wing myth. Again, it's like any cult. I mean, I come from a Muslim background, and it's in Islam. Like, love Islam more than you love your family. Did you have to take mandatory DEI training or anything like that, or like what's it like? Like
Yes.
I've spoken with professors and I've spoken with administrators, but I rarely get a chance to speak to someone who's actually going to a university. See, like what's that like?
So currently, I'm doing two mandatory courses for graduation for my program. I'm in health and physical education with a major in ecotourism and outdoor leadership. And for the Faculty of Health and Physical Education, there's two mandatory courses. There's Introduction to HPED 1000, and then there is Wellness in the Student HPED 1040. And both of these courses involve indoctrination into diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as indigenization and decolonization. It is permeated throughout. They teach us, for example, there was one slide, and I can um, show this to you later, uh, where they do an intersectional placement of a white student with Canadian citizenship, and they have all these different bubbles that show different aspects of your identity, you know,
Mhm.
man, woman, all these things. And under citizenship, where it says Canadian, there's a little line that goes to uh, guilt for colonialism, and another line that goes to shame, and then saying wanting to be an advocate. So they're right there. They're saying that if you're a white Canadian, you should feel shame, guilt, and you should want to be an advocate for indigenization and decolonization. So this is blatant indoctrination. They tried to teach us about indigenous ways of knowing, which I just find to be hogwash. It is, and I did, you know, luckily the professors I currently have are, they seem to have some sort of understanding of academic freedom. And so when I put up my hand, I said, "Can I disagree?" And the professor gave me the floor for a minute. And I just said, you know, ways of knowing to me seems like a very arrogant term. You know, wouldn't it be better to say something like ways of attempting to ascertain or pursue the truth? Something like that. You know, a way of knowing sounds like something you're not allowed to question, and it's anti-scientific, right? And science isn't necessarily a Western thing, or it's not based on your race. Science is just a method of trying to use repetition, controlling your variables and that sort of thing to try and figure out what is going on. Yeah, they're definitely brainwashing us with mandatory DEI training, but it was said, and I don't understand why, because we currently have a conservative government. It was said in class that this was coming from top down, that this was mandated by the Alberta government. And so it must have been mandated during the NDP, but I don't know why the conservatives haven't corrected this.
I don't think a lot of people realize how widespread this is. Like, I started looking into this stuff around 2014, and it's just because I got called a white supremacist for criticizing Islam, and I'm like, well, I'm brown.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm brown. Where does this come from? I got to find out. Like you were talking about the indoctrination. So there's this book called Not My Idea, and it was taught to kindergarten students, a bunch of states. And I don't know if it made it up to Canada, but this was not like, this is right around the George Floyd thing, right? And it was like right after that. So in the aftermath of that, when everyone was jumping on, like more people were jumping on this bandwagon. Kindergarten kids. There's a little picture in it, and it's talking about I can't remember if it was white privilege or whiteness. I sold my soul. Like, you're selling your soul for colonialism, racism. I'm sorry, little kid in kindergarten is not responsible for any of that shit. And you're teaching it to kids in kindergarten. It's just the same kind of stuff that you were talking about with the Canadian citizenship, but it's even more blunt because you're going after a younger audience, and you can be a lot more blunt, and you don't need the nuance or anything. Actually, like, the nuance would probably hurt, but like, I'm not saying there was much nuance in what they're showing you, but like, compared to the two, right? So this stuff is from top down. Okay, in Canada, I can give you the timeline. Like, in since about 2010, it was in middle schools. Oh, sorry, in high schools. Since around 2013, it was in middle schools. Since 2018, depending on the province, it was K through 12. By about 2020, just about every province, it was in K through 12. Now, the Alberta government, yeah, fine. I like some of the things Danielle Smith is doing, but I don't think she's looked at how deep this stuff goes. It's been infecting our culture since the late 90s. John McWhorter, like, he said that, oh, we need to go back to a 1997 mindset. Like, intersectionality, started writing about it in the late 80s. Critical race theory was named as such in 1989. By the early 90s, you started having this stuff taking over certain of the humanities. By the late 90s, you had people coming out with masters and PhDs, and the first level people who had masters and PhDs and stuff. Then they started going back into the academy and into government and stuff like that, or into schools or into administration. Again, that comes back to like this guy Deutschke or whatever, the long march through the institutions, and that's what this was. It was setting up the march through the institutions. These people come in, open up a bridgehead, and then they start bringing in more people who think like them, and the university starts pumping out more and more. And so you get to the point where segregated meetings, diversity meetings for government employees. You've got our foreign service being taught that reading and
Holy.
writing is white supremacy culture. Okay, what are you going to like? You can come in and clean house of all these people, but you have no one to replace them because no one's been taught to think differently. You know, there might be some, um, and what are you going to do with all the people you fire? Like, there's not enough jobs in Starbucks for these people.
Well, they're useless people with no skills, and they don't have the ability to critical think. They're just zealots in a cult. And they're going to fight as hard as they can because this is how they butter their bread. And they saw an opportunity, they're Machiavellians, and so this is a way for them to gain coercive power by, forcing this cult and taking over these institutions. Like a university is not supposed to have a prescribed doctrine. If it has a prescribed doctrine, it becomes an indoctrination center. It is fine if you want to have these thoughts and beliefs and explore these ideas as an academic, if you want to, have a talk about this, but people need to be able to challenge them, and they need to be able to challenge them vehemently. Like they need to be able to really take it to task. And so if you're a university, you're not a true academic institution if you have a prescribed doctrine or some sort of espoused view, which the Mount Royal University does. They have a diversity, equity, and inclusion mandate. They have a decolonization, indigenization mandate. And so they are no longer an academic institution. And they used to be a great institution. They used to, there was a panel set up by Frances Widdowson, who was fired from this university. She was found to be
Yeah.
wrongfully terminated. Frances Widdowson can be followed at Woke Academy, and her website is wokeacademy.info to plug her. She had a panel, I believe, that had TERFs on one side and trans activists on the other side. And then they had moderators, and they had a
Hmm.
Q&A. And that was the last time that Mount Royal actually had open discussion and discourse and debate. I believe that was in like 2015 or something like that. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of useless people who don't have any ability to do anything else other than execute coercive control to promote their own ideologies. And back to what
Yeah.
you were saying about the ideology itself, um, little girls and little boys, it does not change their gender to be interested in things that are not typical of a little boy or a little girl. When I was a little girl, I used to get very disappointed and upset. I didn't even like having birthday parties anymore because everyone would just buy me Barbies. That was the thing back then. And I didn't even want to have birthday parties. I would be like, I don't want a party. And I would get all these Barbie dolls, and I would ritualistically, after everybody had left, rip their heads off and throw them in the garbage. I was so mad about getting Barbies. And I was a little tomboy, and I kept my hair short. When I was 5 years old, my parents put me in ballet, and they thought, she's a little girl, she's going to do ballet. And I really didn't want to do it. And they told me that I should do it. And so I got an orange Slurpee as a uh, something to motivate me to go to ballet after I had done one of the lessons. And I took it and I pretended to accidentally dump it all over my pink outfit. And then I hid behind the couch and refused to go. And they said, well, you're a little girl. Like, why don't you want to go to ballet? And I said, I want to do karate. So they put me in karate. I ended up getting a black belt, and I ended up doing tournaments against boys. And I was also, because of karate, we would do up to 2 to 3,000 push-ups once we got at a black belt level um, per session, training session. And so I was undefeated in arm wrestles against the boys until grade 11. And it was quite distressing when they went through puberty and they started being able to beat me in arm wrestles. And I had to contend with the biological reality that they were stronger than me. No matter how much I trained, the boys, even if they didn't train, started becoming stronger than me. And I am so grateful the time that I grew up where I got to just be a
Mm.
tomboy without anyone whispering in my ear, without anyone thinking that I should be signed up for hormone blockers, hormones, or a double mastectomy or anything like that. I got to grow up and I got to become a mother. I got to enjoy my femininity. And I still enjoy, the masculine aspects of myself, right? Like I'm glad that I can teach my sons how to tackle properly in football because I used to play football with the boys every day, and stuff like that. And, teach my boys how to spar, all that sort of stuff. So no matter how much I engaged in quote unquote masculine activities, it didn't make me less of a female. It doesn't make me less of a woman if I enjoy traditionally masculine things. And that was the whole thing with feminism back in the day was that a woman can do things, some like the things that men can do, like they can become judges, they can become engineers if they want to, but we don't need affirmative action or lower standards.
Mangalus, but you're doing something along the lines of sports medicine, you said, right? Like something.
Health and physical education with a major in ecotourism and outdoor leadership. So I play outside for my degree, canoeing and stuff, right?
There is got to be some physiological courses with that, like some sort of like on biology, but like, kinetics and that kind of stuff in your course. So, I mean, I don't know if you know the case of Amy Ham, the nurse out from BC. So, yeah, the Nurses Association is putting her on trial for saying, no, there's,
She said, I stand with J.K. Rowling, I believe. I stand with J.K. Rowling. It was a billboard, right, that she put up with Billboard Chris.
but now it's also come down to the fact, she like in court and stuff, but she's saying like men can't become women. Like, so you have a nursing organization arguing that men can become women. I'm just wondering about it. I'm
Oh.
just wondering about in your school, in your courses, does that come up? Because
So in my courses, the gender ideology comes up as your gender is separate from your sex. And I paused the class when this came up in one of my courses. And I just said, this is a theory, correct? I asked the professor, this is a theory? And she said, yes, this is a theory. And I said, and theories can be incorrect, right? And she said, yeah. So I kind of like used the Socratic method to try and get her to point out, but they've never actually blatantly stated that men can become women. But for anyone that's on the edge of this argument, thinking that you can become a woman or you can become a man, that is not true because we are mammals. If you are a fish, a parrotfish, for example, can change sex. If you're a frog or an amphibian, these are lower down in the evolutionary hierarchy, right? So they're more simple organisms. We're highly complex organisms. We have a lot of evolution that made us so that we are very sexually dimorphic and we cannot change sex. No amount of surgeries or hormones can actually make mammals change sex.
but there's one thing I want to ask you about because so you said you were doing karate with boys and stuff, and so obviously this was prepubescent boys. I'm just curious about that because, well, two things. One, um, you're going to have activists, whatever, if they hear you saying that, and say, like, see, she played against boys. That's why there should be no problem for having whatever that boxer in the Olympics just recently having him fight against women, right?
Right. So
And
in sparring, in black belt rules, um, well, and first of all,
yeah,
I had no women really to spar against at my level because I had one against all of them. And so in order to be challenged, I was very young when I was the youngest in my dojo to get a black belt at 14. This was back when they would send videos of you sparring and doing your kata to the head Japanese master, and he would decide if you got your black belt or not. And he said that I could get it early. Normally, you get it at 16. And so I had no one else to compete against. And in order to compete in sparring, there's no contact to the face. right? There's light contact to the body, but there's no contact to the face. And sparring is all about respect. You're not actually trying to hurt the other person. When you're in a fight in the Olympics, you're actually trying to like knock the other person out. You're actually trying to hurt them. So, and the men, they seem to like, even when I played football with the dudes or when I played hockey with the dudes, they understood that I was a woman and they would treat me gently. Like they were like, it was, there was that respect.
Yeah.
No one was trying to hurt me. And so that's why it's very different from saying, oh, well, a man can go and try and beat up a woman in the Olympics. If a woman wants to compete in a men's category and they're okay with letting her into their spaces, I
Yeah.
don't feel entitled to compete against men. They agreed to it. But if women are not agreeing to it, then no one should feel entitled to enter those sports.
Might have been Helen Joyce who was talking about how even prepubescent boys have an advantage over prepubescent girls, like when it comes to like certain things like strength and endurance and whatever. Like she was just talking about, yeah, it's good to put in a thing that someone who's gone through puberty can compete. She was just pointing out that how at every stage, when you look at certain things, boys will like if you're looking at like a 6-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, the boy will have certain physical advantages and the girl will have advantages in other areas.
Right. And like with this sparring, like I said, because there's no contact to the face and very
Mhm.
light contact to the body in black belt rules, I would not have been able to have compete if it was full contact. One
Okay.
hit, I would have been out with these dudes. Right? It was because it was no contact or very light contact that it was able to just be this fun sort of game, almost like a dance, where you just try and get points to be like, "Ha, I was able,
Yeah.
you didn't block that, right? But I'm not actually hurting you." If I would have been actually taking a hit, I would be done. Or if it was involved like actual physical, like grabbing, like jujitsu or something like that, that involves like full on grappling, I would have been done. Right. So that is not an excuse to put men in women's sports.
When you bring up the fact that the U.S. women's soccer team would practice against high school boys, like high school seniors, and still lose, but they're like, oh, but see,
Mhm.
they're playing against men, so it's fine. Like that, like they would turn that around on you, and we're like pointing out, like, okay, these are fully grown, like not professionals because they're Olympic athletes, but they're Olympic athletes. They're training. They're at the top of their game, and yet they have to play high school seniors and still end up losing. Like and the TRA side is, oh no no no. See, like it's fine for women to play against men, and like I'm saying, like your words will be used for that. Like I said, if they hear them, they hear you say it, your words will be used.
Right. Well, and then we could get into the nuance. Maybe that might even open a conversation. Like it's but as far as gender and sex being two different things, I don't think that they are. They're trying to make it so that your brain is seen as having
yeah,
being male or female in the wrong body. And I think that that's absolutely ridiculous.
yeah, that's been debunked way too many times. Look, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just a couple of last things. So, what happens after Mount Royal? Like, so when you finish your courses and you want to advance, like, is this going to put a black mark on your record? So if you're trying to get like,
I don't
graduate.
think it'll either be resolved
Mhm,
or I'm gonna get kicked out of school. So this
mhm.
is most likely, I think their end game is that I'm going to be expelled.
Okay. So then what then? Like,
Because this is a kangaroo court, right? So
yeah,
whatever they determine, yeah. So whatever they determine, I believe that the process is the punishment, like I've said. So, but I believe their end game is to have me expelled.
I mean, I'm just curious. It's like, so if that would happen, what are your chances of getting back into another school, or is there another school that offers like similar programs, or like, is it
No, I think I'd just be, my academic career would be over.
honestly, it's to ruin someone's life over innocuous comments. And again, I'm going to go back to that double standard. So, I'll bring in the Palestinian thing again. Like, they were freaking out, like, right when the first protest happened, right after October 7th last year. There were some law firms that said, okay, well, we're not going to hire these people because there was a whole bunch of people from Harvard Law, or even like forget the the protests about Israel-Palestine. It was Columbia law and it was Stanford law on two separate occasions. They harassed a speaker off stage, and one of them, the professor that had invited that speaker, like a couple hundred law students lined the corridor up to her hallway and didn't say a word, but just were staring at her intimidatingly as she got to her office because she invited a speaker on campus that they didn't like. And I think the speaker was a judge or something. And it's so you had people saying, well, we're not going to hire these students. And it's like, oh my God, like, it's so bad, this and that. But it, these people actually physically threatened the speaker. Some of them, like I said, rushed the stage. What they were doing to that professor. These were people who were using intimidation tactics and, potentially, and showing a potential for violence where you weren't. And there's that double standard again. You're gonna maybe have your life ruined. And sorry, I don't want to be that harsh, but they're gonna, like, if this is something that you want to do, and it's something like your ambition, they're gonna take that away from you potentially. Whereas these law students, when you had judges and stuff saying, and law firms saying, we won't hire these, and judges saying, okay, none of these people are going to clerk for me. Everyone was outraged. Like, how dare you? And again, there's that whole double standard idea. Like, it's either, like, in that case with the law students, it was liberating tolerance. In your case, it's repressive tolerance. We have to repress you to be more tolerant. And in that case, we have to allow that. We have to tolerate them because we want to protect them. So it's said it's there again.
Right. Well, and they're going to use the term like they've been using the term harassment as well for my posts and that sort of thing. I've never ever gone to someone's office and stood outside their office and stared them down. That would be real harassment. Me simply saying, I think that this person is a groomer because they exhibit groomer behavior, such as advocating that children keep secrets from their parents. That is my critique, and I believe I have a right to it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I avoid a lot of this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't get me in trouble or anything like that, but like the whole, okay, is woke Marxist or not? Are these people Nazis or not? Are they groomers? What? They're authoritarians, they're totalitarians. These people are indoctrinating kids, and I leave it at that. Like, I mean, be saying they're indoctrinating kids into this ideology. I'm not going to get into an argument of whether or not woke is communist or not. It has roots in Marxism, but I just rather just say it's a totalitarian ideology, and I can compare it to different totalitarian ideologies and show the similarities. But I'm not going to, at that point, I don't have to get into that argument. The problem with this stuff in school is you're indoctrinating kids to think in only one certain way. You're not giving them options. I don't want to get into those secondary and tertiary arguments. The main argument's too important. And I'm not trying to tell you I don't try to dissuade people from using that term or whatever. I'm just saying that's my thinking on that. And it's,
well, something that's interesting because you use the word pedophile there, something that the groomers of the trans ideology and the groomers of the pedophiles have in common is that they say that the children, the minors, get to set the boundaries, right? So pedophiles will use the excuse saying that the minor initiated, and then the trans groomers will say that the children get to decide what medicalization they want, what gender they are, and so both of the groomers of the pedophiles and the trans have in common the children set the boundaries, whereas adults should set the healthy boundaries.
okay.
Adults are the ones who should have the best interest of the minors in mind and say, I'm sorry, this is not healthy for you. This is healthy for you. If you can take away the pedophilia and the trans issue, set the boundaries with your child on the fact that they can't eat a whole tub of ice cream at 1 a.m. You know what I mean? Like, adults have to set the boundaries for minors. And so those are two things that those two groups have in common. And
queer theory, read Judith Butler. I'm trying to think some of the others. I mean, Judith Butler talks about man boy love. So queer theory and gender theory pick up more from Foucault. They're more postmodern than they are critical theories. Foucault was a pedophile. Foucault tried to normalize it, and it's not normalizing that. That's one thing you got. It's it's destigmatizing. Once something becomes the norm, then it's part of the hegemony. I can't even hegemony.
Hegemony?
Thank you. I couldn't even say the word for a second. It's part of that. So then it becomes oppressive. So you just destigmatize it. So they want to destigmatize pedophilia. They don't want to normalize it. But so Judith Butler, Gail Rubens. I'm trying to think of some of the others that I've read. Like, and you can read papers, and they are fully for destigmatizing anything to do with pedophilia. So queer theory and gender theory have that at their base. So that's where you get the whole consent thing. It's anyways, like look, we can get into a huge long argument about that if you
Well,
want,
there's
but it's
Yeah, there's one more thing you should be aware of, and that is the Barry Neufeld
yeah,
case. So Barry Neufeld is in
okay.
BC. Um, he has a hearing coming up on the 6th of December, which anyone can tune into. They have to
Mhm.
apply in advance. But he was a school trustee, and I believe he was also a parole officer who worked with child sexual
Mhm.
abusers. So he has a huge
Mhm.
resume in dealing with child sexual abuse, and he called out the Soji one, two,
Okay.
three, right? And so now they're doing a human rights case against him or something. So it's a free speech issue. This could affect all Canadians. This is going to be a linchpin case. You can find information about him on the Gays Against Grooming Canada.
Okay.
Um, and it's not groomers, it's
Mhm.
grooming, Gays Against Grooming Canada, and they're kind of keeping updates on the Barry Neufeld case as well as any sort of activism. They're doing a convoy coming up soon. I think tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow that they're doing their convoy in Chilliwack area. I think they're driving to Vancouver. So they're trying to try him for hate speech. So if they try him for hate speech and find him guilty of hate speech with his resume of understanding child sexual abuse and him calling this out, then this is going to set a precedence possibly across all of Canada. So this is the big one. They're trying to take down a big gun in this fight. So this is something that everyone needs to be aware of and spread the word.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I because I thought maybe it's the last name's the same. That's why maybe I got it confused. But yeah, no, I didn't know about that. I mean, look, until we get rid of the liberals, this is all written in stone thanks to C-16 and C-4. With those two bills being passed, it's a human rights violation in Canada to misgender someone, and it's a human rights violation to basically talk about anything other than affirmation therapy. So I'm not optimistic. Like if you've gone like the human rights tribunals in Canada are basically social justice tribunals. Our country is in such huge need of repair, and it doesn't matter who wins the next election. I mean, okay, it matters in some sense that you need someone to put a stop to it. If you're not prepared for a generation long struggle and a generation long course to fix this, like you're not prepared to take this stuff on. And I mean, it's the Milton at the start of long is the way and hard is the road that out of hell leads to heaven. Like, I mean, it's gonna be a long film.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Long is the way and hard is the road that, or hard is the way and long is the road that leads out of hell into heaven.
Wow.
Since the late 90s, you've had our institutions taken over. It doesn't matter who wins the next, like, I mean, it doesn't matter if someone who's anti woke wins the next election. It matters how much grit and determination they have and how ready they are to excise this ideology from forming policy in our government and in our institutions. And it's at all levels. So, like I said, I'm baby being, people are going to say I'm being pessimistic. I'm like, I try to be a realist. I don't care if if it's not happy news or not, but know what you're fighting because if you don't, you're going to get burnt out really quick and you're going to get,
It's very difficult. There was a professor, if you look up on Frances Widowson's page, her YouTube channel, there's a from Brock Civis, she did a talk. It was a memorial talk for a professor who was a chemist, and he spoke out against DEI and he died of a heart attack shortly thereafter, and three people at his funeral said that it was directly related to the stress and the toll from how the school treated him when they fired him.
Are you talking about Richard Blitzko?
No, I forget his name, Alan something, I believe. But so if you look up Francis Widdowson's YouTube page, the Brock Civis talk, I believe it's one of the most important historical talks right now in contemporary history. But yes, so the toll that this can take, that these people can take, is brutal. And I like to remember what Robert Anton Wilson said. Robert Anton Wilson was a heretic, and he said, you know, uh, even if everything goes to shit, the optimists have more fun along the way.
Look, I mean, okay, look, like I said, I don't try to be optimistic or pessimistic. I try to be realistic. It's H.L. Mencken. It's something along the lines of human flourishing has progressed because of gay fellows frolicking along the highways and byways of life, throwing dead cats into sanctuaries and proving that the god in the sanctuary is dead. And like, like so I go, look, I'm gonna have fun as much as I can, but I'm still gonna say, like, if you're not ready for this, if you think this is gonna be, oh, Poilievre's gonna get elected, or Bernie is gonna get elected, and then this stuff will disappear, or Trump got elected, woke is finished. Like, I'm sorry, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I wasn't even ready for this. I wasn't ready for this battle. You know what I mean? And I'm so grateful for people like you, and I'm grateful for everybody else that has been behind the scenes and overtly and covertly just giving me some pep talks and that sort of thing, because this is hard. It does take a toll. And I'm going to pull myself together and strengthen my resolve, and I'm going to harden myself and get ready for this fight.
Cool. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. If you want to let people know where they can get a hold of you, or if you have like a GoFundMe or anything.
I'm on X. I'm on X. My at or handle is at Nula, Nula, Moonsnail. And it's kind of a funny name. I've had some people say, "Oh, you should change your handle." But Kathy Drake is very generic. So there's a million Kathy Drakes. And Nula was a name given to me by the hereditary chief's son of the Nomgis people in ceremony when I was a sea kayak guide. And it means little sister, which I really liked because I was the oldest in my family. I always wanted to be a little sister. So it's from the Nomgis people. So that's my native name, Nula. And then moon snail it's a predatory snail. So they move really, really slowly, and they'll find little clams and stuff. If you see little holes in the shells, it's because a moon snail drilled into them. But they can actually take crabs on. They can grab the crab and they drill into its brain and they suck out its innards. So moon snails are also, they're very pretty shells. So when I was a sea kayak guide, I fell in love with moon snails and it became my artist name. So a lot of people from the artist community knew me as Moon Snail. So that's why that's my handle.
Okay. Well, look, I'll put that in the description. Like I said, if you have any GoFundMe or if there's any information about your case or whatever that you want people to know, send.
No, there's no, I'm not asking for any money. I don't want any money whatsoever. I'm going to handle this on my own as far as legal fees go and that sort of thing. I hope that everybody sees this and decides that wherever they're going to draw a line in the sand, no matter how much these psychopaths or Machiavellians come after them, let's draw our lines in the sand and let's stand up.
Agree with that. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Kathy. It was good to talk to you, and thanks everyone for listening.